You are never alone with your baby. Not for a moment. Not at 3 in the morning. Not while you cook. Not while you grieve. Someone is always within arm's reach, ready to take the weight off you. For most of human history, this wasn't a luxury. It was survival. For roughly 95% of the time our species has existed, children were not raised by two parents in a private home. They were raised by everyone: grandmothers, aunts, uncles, older siblings, unrelated adults in the same camp. A single mother carrying the entire weight of a child's survival alone would have been almost unthinkable. So, how did it actually work? And what did it cost your ancestors to lose it? Let's start with the number that changes everything. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer Hrdy spent decades studying primates and human evolution, and she landed on a simple but radical idea. Humans are not just social, we are cooperative breeders. That means, unlike almost every other great ape, human mothers evolved to share the job of raising offspring with other members of the group. Chimpanzee mothers do it almost entirely alone. Human mothers never did. This is called alloparenting. Allo simply means other. An alloparent is anyone who helps raise a child who isn't its biological parent. And Hrdy's research suggests this wasn't a nice bonus feature of human society. It was the reason human babies could survive at all. Here's why that matters. Human infants are born absurdly helpless. A baby zebra can stand and run within an hour of birth. A human infant can't even hold up its own head. Our brains are so large and human hips so narrow for walking upright that babies are essentially born 3/4 finished. The rest of the growing happens outside the womb, in the arms of other people. Carrying that kind of dependency alone would have been a death sentence, both for the mother and the child. So evolution built in a solution. Mothers who had help had children who survived. Mothers who didn't, often didn't. Anthropologist Melvin Konner spent years living among the Hoansi, a hunter-gatherer people in the Kalahari Desert of southern Africa, studying how their children were raised. What he documented reshaped how anthropologists think about childhood. Hoansi infants were almost never put down. They were carried, skin to skin, for the first year or more of life, passed between mothers, grandmothers, and older children throughout the day. Crying was answered within seconds, not minutes. There was no concept of letting the baby cry it out. Now picture it. A woman named, say, Tala, sits by a fire in the evening. Her infant sleeps against her chest in a soft sling. Her mother sits beside her, roasting tubers dug up that afternoon. Her sister's 8-year-old daughter watches Tala's toddler, letting him toddle after beetles in the dirt a few feet away, catching him gently when he stumbles toward the fire. If Tala needs to gather firewood, she doesn't need childcare. She simply hands the baby to whoever's hands are free. This wasn't occasional help. It was the entire architecture of daily life. Anthropologist Barry Hewlett, along with his wife and research partner Bonnie Hewlett, documented something even more surprising among the AKA people of Central Africa: extraordinarily involved fathers. AKA fathers were observed holding or staying within arm's reach of their infants for close to half of the daytime hours. Far more paternal contact than almost any society measured before or since. Fatherhood, in this context, wasn't a side role. It was woven directly into subsistence and survival. This is where the term "it takes a village" stops being a nice phrase and becomes a literal description of how your species reproduced itself for hundreds of thousands of years. But here's a twist almost no one expects. This system wasn't just about safety. It shaped how human children learned to think. Anthropologist David Lancy, who spent his career comparing child rearing across hundreds of cultures, pointed out that in most of human history, children weren't taught the way we teach now. There was no sitting a child down for a lesson. Instead, children learned by hovering at the edges of adult life, watching, mimicking, being handed small real tasks the moment they were ready. A 4-year-old wasn't given a toy hammer. She was given a small digging stick and shown briefly, wordlessly, how to use it. Learning was constant, embedded, and social, not scheduled into 30-minute blocks with a single adult in charge. This also meant something uncomfortable by modern standards. Children were rarely the center of attention. Adults didn't hover, narrate every action, or treat play as a performance to be praised. Independence was expected early, because there were always other hands nearby if something went wrong. Freedom and supervision existed together, not as opposites. So what happened? Why does none of this describe how you were raised, or how most children are raised today? The shift began roughly 10,000 years ago with the spread of agriculture. Settled farming meant fixed land, fixed homes, and eventually fixed nuclear families tied to that land. Extended kin networks didn't vanish overnight, but the constant, communal, many-hands model of childcare started to shrink. Villages replaced camps. Ownership replaced sharing. Over thousands of years, and accelerating sharply in the last 2 centuries with industrialization and urban migration, families spread out. Grandparents moved cities away. Communities became neighborhoods of strangers. And the job that used to belong to 10 or more adults quietly collapsed onto 1 or 2. This is the part that should land differently now. If you've ever felt like modern parenting is exhausting in a way that seems almost unnatural, that's because, evolutionarily speaking, it is. You are trying to do, alone or as a pair, what your ancestors distributed across an entire community. The isolation many parents describe today, the sense of being the only person responsible for a crying infant at 3 a.m. with no one else awake in the house, is not a personal failure. It's a structural one. Your body and your baby's brain are still wired for a village that, for most people, no longer exists. Researchers studying postpartum depression and parental burnout increasingly point to exactly this mismatch. Not that modern parents are less capable, but that they are running an ancient support system on a fraction of its original hardware. Fewer hands, fewer eyes, fewer breaks. Same underlying need. None of this means the past was some effortless paradise. Jew, Hoansi, and Aka communities still face disease, hunger, and real danger. Life was not easy. But the loneliness so many parents describe today, the sense of drowning quietly behind a closed front door, was not the default setting of human childhood for most of our history. It was manufactured slowly by the very systems that gave us houses, schedules, and privacy. So the next time you see a parent struggling to hold a crying baby while unloading groceries with the other arm, know what you're actually looking at. You're looking at someone running a 200,000-year-old operating system with 90% of its hardware missing. Not a failure of one person, a ghost of a village that used to stand behind them. You are never meant to be alone with your baby. Somewhere in your body, some ancient, buried instinct is still waiting for someone else's hands to appear.